Knights of Honor 2 Sovereign is the long-overdue sequel to 2005's Knights of Honor, an empire simulator that prided itself on accessible real-time grand strategy gameplay. For better and worse, little if anything has changed in the last 17 years, as Knights of Honor 2 is essentially the same, for the most part accessible, addicting, and oddly relaxing game as was its prequel. But is it for you? Let's put Knights of Honor 2 under the microscope to find out. At the core of Knights of Honor are, fittingly, knights, 9 if you count your king. Knights can be army-leading marshals, money-hungry merchants, peace-brokering diplomats, pagan-converting clerics, or relentlessly bloodthirsty and borderline suicidal spies. Really, this guy will ask you to assassinate the neighboring monarch every 5 minutes. Regardless of where you begin your journey, each flavor of knight will no doubt prove valuable at some point in your 100-plus hour quest to conquer medieval Europe, though none are worth more than marshals. Without them, your armies, which can range from mangy, flea-ridden peasant hordes to ironclad war machines, are unable to leave the city to, say, pillage an enemy province, squash a pesky rebellion, take a seaside vacation, you name it. I like this game, but I hate this design decision, because it means that every merchant, cleric, diplomat, or spy you offer a seat to on your royal court is one fewer marshal you can use to, win the actual game. Because as your empire expands and you enter endgame, responding to the relentless continent-wide rebellions and deranged monarchs convinced that they own your provinces because they married your ugliest daughter 10 years ago becomes a full-time job that only marshals can do. That is to say, do well. There is a way to mobilize your other knights, but it's a huge hassle and rarely worth it, because these armies are smaller, and mobilization cancels any benefits those non-martial knights were otherwise creating for your kingdom. Thus, as the achievement you unlock for doing so suggests, this is purely a desperation measure. This admittedly huge pain in the ass aside, I wasn't kidding when I said this game is actually very relaxing. Because when you're not micromanaging marshals, Knights of Honor 2 treats you to some highly enjoyable base building and empire management gameplay. Each province has the ability to build up to 8 buildings of increasing significance, ranging from lowly farms, churches, houses, and markets, to full-blown castles, to even region-specific resources with historical tie-ins. Each building you build will contribute some combination of gold, books, religion, commerce, food, levies, and workers to your empire, and you'll need each if you mean to expand. Every building can then be upgraded to produce new units or resources, and said upgrades apply to that type of building kingdom-wide. Scale up enough and you'll be deemed a great power, and opposing kingdoms will occasionally vote on whether or not, and trust me, it's usually not, to anoint you world leader. When you inevitably fail to win that popularity contest, rest easy, you can also win by unlocking every good in the game, or just killing everyone outright. And if at this point it feels like I'm throwing a lot at you, just wait until you play the actual game. Because for all its claims of accessibility, Knights of Honor 2 kind of butchers its first hour, hurling the kitchen sink at new players in the form of a never-ending text-based tutorial that'll pop up anytime you click on anything. Luckily, Knights of Honor's UI and notification system are intuitive to the point that once you get done playing tutorial whack-a-mole, everything becomes pretty self-explanatory anyway. Your advisor and knights will keep you arguably over-informed of developments big and small, from changes in the opinion of your kingdom's social classes to the birth of new children, to full-blown declarations of war. UI elements are responsive for the most part, but things could be a bit more helpful. For example, clicking on a missing building prerequisite doesn't open up the actual thing you need to build. And the codex, where you're supposed to find the things you're supposed to build, is super dense and sorely missing visual cues. I mean, when I go to a Mexican restaurant, I want some pictures, And if at this point you're starting to think that Knights of Honor 2 doesn't actually sound all that accessible at all, and you can't believe it was marketed as such, I hear you, but I think that might say more about the genre at large than it does this individual game. After all, empire simulators are notorious for their awful tutorials and steep learning curves, and by comparison, Knights of Honor 2 is downright simple. You really just keep building and keep killing.
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
While fun and addicting for a good while, this simplicity ultimately ends up hurting the game's overall value. For though Knights of Honor 2 sports a multiplayer mode and a handful of optional, quote, minor victory conditions, I don't think the actual gameplay loop here is deep enough to appease those diehard fans of the genre fiending for their next Crusader Kings hit. After all, Crusader Kings got more mileage from its memorable human storytelling than it did kingdom micromanagement. Knights of Honor campaigns, meanwhile, are largely devoid of any organic narrative. Kings are born and die and born again with little variation, most notifications are recycled multiple times per playthrough, and it doesn't help that the voice acting itself is identical regardless of which kingdom you choose.
A kingdom has formed a defensive pact against us. A kingdom has joined a defensive pact against us.
It's by no means a shallow experience, but it could be deeper. Ditto that for the actual RTS combat. As far as I can tell, the combat here is a complete rehash of the prequel. Armies spawn on opposite sides of a small map, and you win when the enemy leader or leaders die, or you capture the other side's capture points. Everything in between is pretty forgettable. The animations are janky, the unit collision is awful, definitely disappointed with the combat and visuals generally. This game looks okay from a distance, which is ironic because I never felt like I could zoom out enough. but on closer look everything falls apart, to the point that if you told me this was a quick and dirty remaster of Knights of Honor 1, I'd have probably believed you. But hey, Knights of Honor 1 was good in so many ways that more complex Empire simulators are not. It's faster, it's easier, and it's a pretty relaxing experience. I'm giving Knights of Honor 2 Sovereign an aggregate mega score of 2.91 out of 5, but if it's any consolation to those who waited so patiently for the sequel, I plan on playing this game in my spare time going forward, despite the mediocre score. As always, this is Scope, and thanks so much for watching.